So whether you're traveling abroad or moving overseas, one thing that you're going to have to figure out is what to do about money. So I lived in Japan for more than 10 years straight. And then for the past couple of years, I've been going back and forth between the US in Honolulu, Hawaii and Tokyo, Japan. So today I'm going to talk about what I've done, what I do now, and my experiences with this. Just in case you're getting ready to take a trip to Japan or are going to move there. But keep in mind that I'm not like a financial advisor or anything like that. I'm just going to share my experiences with you. I'm going to talk about a few different things, so feel free to skip around the video to whatever you're most interested in. So before I moved to Japan, I grew up in Honolulu, Hawaii, and then I was living around the US mainland. So my primary checking account that I was using at the time was Bank of America, and it remained my main US bank for most of the time that I was living in Japan. The problem with them was that they charged some fees, and they don't even have a location in Hawaii, which I was going back to every vacation. So it didn't really give me much benefit anymore. I also had accounts at Hawaii banks, but they didn't really give me any international living benefit either. And I had an issue with one of them at one point where I was kind of locked out and I had to submit a letter and stuff, and it still didn't get clear. So basically, the takeaway is to make sure that your bank is okay and is aware that you will be traveling or moving overseas, because you don't want to run into any issues while you're overseas. Now, when it comes to going overseas, the big question that people ask is, when do I take out money, or when do I exchange money? Do I do it at home before I leave? Do I go there and do it? Where do I do it? What are the fees like? What is the exchange rate going to be? So it can be kind of a hassle to think about. And if you're actually living abroad, you are going to want to have access to your cash whenever you need, just in case. So what I ended up doing was making my primary US checking account at Charles Schwab. So Charles Schwab is mostly known for their investment related accounts, which I already was using, but I came across their investment checking account, and it really seemed to be tailored for people who travel a lot or are overseas for a good amount of time. It basically lets you use any ATM overseas and take out cash without any fees. So you won't get hit with any foreign transaction fees or any non-network ATM fees, because Schwab will reimburse those fees back to you. With Schwab, I don't really have to worry about being able to access my cash back home, because I can go to any ATM and in a convenience store even and take out cash, and I don't have to think about the exchange rate because it's going to be whatever it is at the time. Now, there might be other checking accounts that kind of have the same features that maybe I just don't know about or don't have experience with, but I think Schwab is a good one to consider. Okay, so that's good for travel, but if you're actually moving to Japan, you are going to need to have a Japanese bank account so that your employer can pay you. In general, I found Japanese banks to be way more rigid when it comes to opening up a bank account, and especially for foreigners. But even more than that, I think it's harder to close the bank account. So make sure you choose wisely. So when I first moved to Japan, I was working in Fukuoka Prefecture, and my employer took me to Fukuoka Bank to open up an account there. It's a local prefectural bank, but I had no problems with them. I was able to transfer money to my accounts back in the US through services like GoLoids or TransferWise, which is now Wise, which were the main services at the time. So pretty smooth, no issues with them. So when I moved to Tokyo and started working in Tokyo, my employer told me to get a Mitsubishi UFJ account. UFJ is the largest bank in Japan, and I got two accounts there. One was the Futsu account, which is pretty standard across all banks in Japan, but it's basically a checking account. And then a second account, which is called a Teiki account, which is a type of savings deposit account. So the Futsu account received my paychecks every month, and then the Teiki account will deduct an amount from my checking account every month, and that deposit would earn interest over time. FYI about the Teiki accounts is not a regular savings account where you can just choose the amount to withdraw or transfer or something like that. You have to go into each deposit one by one and choose which one to withdraw. So it's a little bit tedious, but it is a type of account that earns a little bit more interest versus other accounts. Overall, UFJ was fine, really convenient because they had ATMs everywhere. And on the day-to-day basis, I didn't have any issues with them. They were a little bit tedious when it came to security. If you want to do a transfer, you have to do this one-time password kind of thing, which is pretty typical across all of the banks in Japan. They're very tight on security. I guess the two main issues that I had with them was one, there wasn't really any support for English. So it was very difficult if I had to go into the branch and do something. And then two, if you're outside of Japan, you can't really do banking with UFJ unless you pay an additional monthly fee to be able to do so. So if you're overseas and you're trying to do some kind of banking and you don't have that subscription, you could get locked out of your account. Otherwise, no real issues. This was my main bank account for some time. Another bank account that I opened was at Japan Post Bank, or Yucho. It was just a side bank account, so nothing serious, super basic, no bells and whistles or anything like that. Supposedly it had some English support, but I've never experienced any English support at all in any of the branches that I've been to, so I'm not sure about that. There's probably some at certain locations, but definitely not all. So the bank that I ended up settling on in Japan was one that had a lot of English support and was basically made for people doing some kind of international lifestyle or international banking. And that bank was SMBC Prestia, not the regular SMBC Sumitomo Ginko Bank, but their Prestia or SMBC Trust Bank. So SMBC, like UFJ, is one of the biggest banks in Japan. And when I signed up for my account there, I swear, it was like going from coach to business class. The office or the branch location was located above the regular SMBC branch. So I took an elevator up and it was like a nice space, nice chairs, very clean. There's a lot of English and Japanese going around, super international vibe in there. I will say, though, that it is mainly a Tokyo bank. So the locations that they have are located mostly in Tokyo with maybe a couple or a few in other cities. And they're not at every SMBC location. It's only specific ones. With Prestia, you get two accounts. You get a Japanese yen account and a foreign currency account. And so you can get paid in your Japanese yen account. For the foreign currency account, sometimes they'll do these promotions where it's kind of like a CD, and if you buy a certain amount of a specific currency and put it in that account, you'll earn a high rate of interest. And because it's geared to this kind of international banking, there's no fees for banking in case you're overseas. And then finally, what's good about Prestia is that because they're SMBC, you can use an SMBC ATM and not incur any fees. And those ATMs, like UFJ, are everywhere, so it's pretty convenient. But if you're traveling, you're probably just mainly worried about cash and credit cards that you take with you. So Japan is known to be a cash-oriented society. In 2023, 39.3% of transactions were deemed cashless, which is definitely the minority. So cashless means credit cards, debit cards, QR code payments, electronic money, stuff like that. So if you're planning a trip to Japan and you don't have one of those checking accounts, you might be worried about having enough cash on hand for your trip. The thing is, though, and this is mostly for travels in the bigger cities, like definitely Tokyo, but I don't think you need as much cash as you think you do. For example, it's 2024 and I was in Japan for about 2 or 3 months earlier in the winter and spring. And I probably only spent like 30,000 yen total in that whole time. And right now I've been here for a little bit less than 2 weeks. And seriously, only one transaction so far has been in cash. And that was for 700 yen at a small festival food stand. Everything else I've been paying with Apple Pay and credit cards with the chip. I know a lot of foreign tourists will come to Japan and say, oh, Japan doesn't take Apple Pay, stuff like that. And, for the smaller towns and areas, that is true. You definitely want to have some cash when you go to those places. But if you're going to Tokyo, Osaka, and the main tourist areas, the big cities, I don't think that's really true. Instead of not having Apple Pay be taken, I think there is a communication issue going on. What you should be asking for is to pay with credit and then touch. And then they'll open up their system and you can use Apple Pay and make your payment and everything will be fine. Now, there are times that they don't accept Apple Pay or mobile payments and you have to use a physical credit card. They almost always have to have that little IC chip in there. So definitely make sure your credit cards have that. There are some issues, more so online than offline, with foreign credit cards not being accepted. I don't know the exact reason for that. I know they're a little bit tighter on security. So a lot of times when you're checking out online, they'll ask for an extra verification. Sometimes when you're paying at a machine offline or in a shop or a kiosk or something, they'll ask for a PIN code, but that's not as common in the US at least than it is in Japan to have a PIN code for your credit card. So there can be issues with that. Another reason why this might be the case is that these merchants actually are losing money by doing foreign credit card transactions compared to domestic credit card transactions. It is an issue that is being talked about a little bit more recently because there's such an influx of foreign tourists and the money being lost through these foreign credit card transactions in Japan are getting bigger. I'm not super knowledgeable about that, but I know it is an issue. And if you're wondering, yes, you can put money on your train cards like your Suica and your Passmo cards with a credit card. You can just activate it in your phone and then use Apple Pay to pay for it. There are some issues with certain kind of credit cards again. So the credit cards that I've had no problems with when it came to paying for my train fares or in stores are Apple Card. I know it's super basic. People can make comments about it, but I think it's a great card when it comes to ease of use and convenience. I have not run into any issues with the Apple Card. It's a MasterCard, if you don't know. And basically, it's super smooth. You get no international foreign transaction fees or anything like that. As soon as you pay, the transaction comes up. And I know they have that daily cash back, 2% if you use Apple Pay, which you do get in Japan as well if you are using Apple Pay at the touch terminal. It usually will take a little bit longer to get the cash back. In the US, I think it takes about a day. And then in Japan, it seems to be taking about 3 days before the cash comes back to you. Other cards that I haven't had much issues with is American Express. American Express is taken at a lot of places here in Japan. It's very popular, especially for businesses. I know people have issues with Visa a lot of times for some reason. I'm not sure why. But as far as I know, there's no real science as to like which cards work and which ones don't. So you might want to take at least a few if you're planning to be using card mostly, just in case. But for the most part, like I said, you should be good with credit cards and you should be good with Apple Pay a lot of times. And that is basically how I'm handling going back and forth. Definitely credit card, Apple Pay heavy when I'm in Japan. And I have that checking account to access cash in the US if I need to. I hope that helps. If you're traveling to Japan, good luck. I hope you have a good time. And if you're moving as well, I hope that goes smoothly. If you're new to this channel, my name is Barrett. I lived in Japan for a long time, kind of going back and forth right now. And I make videos about that life, also places that I travel to and a little bit of photography mixed into things. So hope you subscribe if you're interested. But again, thank you for watching and I hope to see you in the next one.